Oh, it was muted all this time. Sorry. Okay. Um, I'm wondering why nobody's reading. Okay, so we can read from here. Somebody likes to start. Am I still muted?
Daksha? No, I can read.
Okay.
Daksha, one second. This is my phone. It's a different phone. Daksha waved her aside. Remove her. I'm sorry. Daksha waved her aside. Remove her. She has become as crazy as her husband. Some of the celestials moved towards Sati, but the yakshas and ghosts immediately surrounded her. Sati waved her guardians to the side and addressed the sages and gods. Shiva protects religion. He is a great universal authority. Do not listen to offenses towards him. Do you not know the Vedic audience regarding blasphemy? Brahmins should block the ears and walk away. Kshatriya should either kill the blasphemer or forcefully cut out his tongue, and Vaishyas and Shudra should give up their own lives. She turned to her father, since you have blasphemed Shiva, I consider my body which comes from you to be contaminated. I shall give it up. It is said that if one eats poisonous food, the best remedy is to vomit. Daksha retorted, how have I blasphemed Shiva? I have merely pointed out that he does not follow the rules and regulations of the Vedas. This is the truth, not blasphemy. Sati said, everyone should behave according to their own position. Next page. Materialists must follow the Vedic audiences, but an elevated transcendentalist can forego these rules. The paths of conditioned and liberated souls are different, just as the rules for gods and humans are different. It is better to follow what is appropriate for you and not criticize others. The Vedas give directions both for family men and renunciants. Those attached to material enjoyment should follow the first, while those who are detached should follow the second. Both of these paths can be neglected by a person fully absorbed in thoughts of Krishna's loving service. Daksha straightened himself. It is because you have been raised in a good family that you remain faithful to your husband, even though he is devoid of all culture. Sati's face flushed. My dear father, neither you nor your psychopathic followers can even imagine the opulence we possess, for you are preoccupied with sacrifice for material gain and filling your bellies with the offered food. Shiva has all perfections, but he does not like to exhibit them. However, he can display any opulence just by his will. This is only possible for great self. Next page. For self-realized persons, Daksha lips curled in disgust, and he spun around to walk away. Sati collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Clearly, her father would not see sense. Gradually, she composed herself. Wiping away her tears, she called after Daksha. You are an offender at Shiva's lotus feet. Unfortunately, you fathered my body. I am ashamed to be related to you. Indeed, I am condemned because of my connection to someone who dares offend Vishnu's greatest devotee. Since I am born of you, my husband sometimes addresses me as Dakshayani. I am ashamed of that name, which reminds me of our relationship. Therefore, I shall quit this body. Sati rose and ordered Maniman to bring her a saffron cloth and an Achaman water pot. Wrapping herself in the cloth, she sat facing north after purifying herself with water. Her half-closed her half-closed eyes and entered into a mystic trance. Assuming the correct sitting posture, she began to lift her life airs upwards, first to her navel, then to her heart and lungs, and from there to between her eyebrows. Then, in great anger, she began to meditate on the fiery air in her body. Her mother, sisters, and celestials, the ghosts and the yakshas, all watched her in confusion. What was she doing? Sensing the tension in the atmosphere, even Daksha turned back to see what was happening. Suddenly, her mother guessed she's going to immolate. No, what's it called?
Yeah, Imali.
Immolate. Self-immolate. Daksha, please stop her. Sati's sister began to wail, and the yakshas and ghosts went wild. They screeched, Daksha, do something, stop her. The Brahmins and gods looked at each other in bewilderment. Maniman and Manda fell at her feet and implored her to stop. Oh, mistress, remember how much Shiva loves you, how he has seated you so respectfully and affectionately on his lap. Kindly do not act rashly. Sati paid no heed to anyone. It was too late. She could not possibly remain in a body associated with Daksha. Now she needed to focus her consciousness on her husband's lotus feet. He was the supreme spiritual master of the world. Simply thinking of him cleansed one of all tins of sin. As the assembly looked on in horror, Satip's body suddenly erupted into flames. Everyone howled. Cries of grief were heard all over the universe as the news of Sati's death spread. Only Daksha remained unmoved. The yakshas and ghostly followers of Shiva went wild. Shiva's beloved wife has given up her life because of Daksha's cruelty. Even the celestials and their wives looked reprovingly at Daksha. Some said, how astonishing that Daksha could not treat his own daughter so harshly that she killed herself. You would not expect that kind of behavior from a leading Prajapati, the supposed guardian of the living entities. Sati did not deserve to be so badly treated by her father. Not only was she a more chaste lady, but also a great devotee. The Brahmins also condemned Daksha. He's hard-hearted and unworthy of being considered a Brahmin. Others said Brahmins should be soft-hearted and forbearing. Yet, for a small breach of etiquette on Shiva's behalf, Daksha became so angry he did not prevent his daughter's death. He will become infamous for this cruel neglect of his daughter. Surely he is envious of the Supreme Lord, otherwise he could not be so heartless. The Yakshas and goats ran about in confusion. How can we tell our Lord Shiva that his beloved wife is dead? He entrusted her to us. We were meant to protect her. What shall we do? Since we failed to save her, let us die, avenging her death. A great cry of revenge, revenge swept through their ranks. Raising their weapons, they rushed on Daksha. Bhrigu realized danger. He was sat on the southern side of the sacrificial fire, and undetected by Shiva's followers, he offered oblations into the flames while uttering hymns from the Yajurveda. Let those who would destroy this sacrifice be killed immediately. As the ghee hit the fire, hosts of powerful gods called Ribhus rose from the flames. Their bodies shone with the power of the moon god. They took up half-burned logs from the great fires and attacked Shiva's followers. The yakshas and ghosts fled in all directions. Daksha watched them scatter. Thank God Bhrigu had acted so swiftly. He gasped him warmly by the shoulders. You, by your great spiritual power, you have saved my life. Astonishing, right?
Oh, actually, Daksha would have been killed if Bhrigu didn't do that. That's it. It would have been the end of Daksha. All the ghosts and the yakshas would have killed him immediately. Because
But
they would,
how
when
did Bhrigu just try to save Daksha by doing this? I'm just wondering. Like, of course, Bhrigu was on Daksha's side, but then how Daksha had not prevented the death of his own daughter, right? That did not even stir Bhrigu's heart, is it?
See, that's a very good question. See, morality, there are different levels of morality, right? Um, that I mean, I'm just thinking of so many instances in Srimad Bhagavatam during the Pandavas losing the dice game. Bhishma sat there, Drona sat there. Why? Because they were thinking of their dharma, right? So they were thinking of their primary official dharma, and their official dharma was to abide by Duryodhana. So similarly, Brigu's official dharma was to protect Daksha. So you can't get sentimental, like a lawyer, if you're trying to fight for some your client's case, and then you see that the person you're fighting against, you see sometimes that they're innocent in some front. You can't just become sentimental and say, oh, they seem this and that, and you can't just speak the truth in the courtroom. You have to protect your client, and that's your primary duty. So dharma and justice and morality, there are different levels. There is a level on the legal level, and then there is a moral level, and then there is a spiritual level. So obviously it's not very easy for everybody to act on a spiritual level of morality and dharma. It's very I mean, even why people end up in prison, because they can't even follow the legal level of morality, right? Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
justice, legal level of justice means don't steal, don't kill somebody, don't hurt somebody, all that, right? Then moral level is like, I mean, here, like all the demigods, some of the celestials were thinking, how could Daksha let this happen? That's the moral level of justice. They understood that this is not fair. Whatever is happening with Sati, it's not fair. How Daksha can do this? It's not legal. Like legally, call it legally, they are all guests of Daksha, not morally. Morally means your heart. Where's your heart? You may be part of Kauravas, but then your heart may be with Pandavas, because morally you're higher. Moral is higher than legal. Spiritual is higher than moral. so, so Brigu, I mean, sorry, the basic duty, the legal duty of Brigu was to protect Daksha. I'm thinking, I mean, maybe he couldn't protect Sati. Only Daksha could have prevented Sati from doing this. The only way that Sati would have stopped it is if Daksha went and apologized and said, so I'm sorry, I should not have said that. Please don't. That's the only way. There's no other way you could stop Sati from becoming so disgusted with Daksha, right?
Only the mother kind of understood what's happening with Satya at that moment. Daksha did not realize it. Like he was just seeing, but then his anger was so much it covered his intelligence to understand that she's giving up her body like that.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't guess, but the point is that even after she dies, after the flames are burning, he just stands there unmoved. He just stays there, just looks at it and say, okay, she killed herself. What am I supposed to do with that? I didn't
Like
push her
how,
into
right?
fire.
Yeah, like how, right? I'm just like so really astonished. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, sometimes human beings, even demigods, mortals, we can call ourselves mortals, okay? Because Daksha is also mortal. So sometimes mortals, we get into the modes in such a way that we get degraded into levels of insanity and levels of cruelty that makes us lose our higher sense of justice, and fall into the trap of tamas guna. And Daksha is in that situation, aggression and tamas guna. Like I said, no, this is like in modern day psychological terms, Daksha would be that typical narcissist who just doesn't care about anybody and anything. I mean, he's a little bit acting like a demon here, but he's a devotee. Very much. All this performance and all is to please Vishnu. But then how we can be devotee if we can't respect devotees? Right? It's like irony. I'm a devotee of Vishnu, but I don't respect devotees of Vishnu. It's like, what? It doesn't make sense. Any other comments? Any other questions?
Mataji, so Bhrigumuni, they will get consequences for that. Consequences for that.
Please repeat. What?
So Bhrigumuni, they will get consequences for that. That he is trying to.
That's what I'm saying. He is trying to protect Daksha, right?
Right.
And it's his dharma to protect Daksha. So he's not going to be punished for that.
Okay.
Because it was his dharma. See, we have dharma on different levels.
But if
Okay.
you have a situation like that, so just like you said, like legal, then moral, then spiritual. So among them, whichever will be highest, since he did not follow that, so like I heard somewhere, like sometimes you are in a situation where you have to check different level of dharma, right?
Hmm.
So he did not
Yeah,
follow
but,
the highest one, and
yeah,
then
but
he.
he's following the basic one. If you
Okay.
go to the government and go, red light is there and you keep going,
Hmm.
especially you do that in America or somewhere, you
Hmm.
keep going and you break traffic rules, right? Why?
Hmm.
Oh, I saw a cat on the street which was dying, so I went to save it. You'll still go to prison. You understand? Because you
Hmm.
can't follow a higher level of dharma if you're not following the basic one, depending on your qualification and who you are, etc. So if Brigu didn't do that, it would be like on a basic level, he is not protecting Daksha. I mean,
What?
his everything would be over. He would still
Oh.
be blamed. That's what I'm saying. Morally
Oh.
or something, nobody will say anything to Brigu. But on
Hmm.
a certain level of dharma, of like legal, I mean, there is no law in that sense there. You understand what I mean? Legal in
Yes. Yes.
celestial
Right.
terms.
Hmm.
So in that way, he would still be held responsible. No,
Okay.
people will say, "Hey, Brigu, you could have done something. You're sitting right at the thing, with one call of the mantras, you could have called the gods and saved Daksha. Why you didn't do that?" He knew he
Okay.
could do that. That's why he did it.
So. Hmm.
Reality is
So on.
always complicated to understand, and it's not by chance that Bhishma and Drona were in these dilemmas.
So in this case, Bhrigu and in the case of Pandavas, Bhishma and Drona, we cannot blame them. Is it so? Like we have to say that they did their part correctly.
Of
Is it
course,
like? Oh.
of course, they did their part, but they did their part on one level.
Oh. Hmm.
They couldn't, obviously, he couldn't perform on the spiritual level because,
Hmm.
okay, on the spiritual level, what should have Brigu done? Gone and preached to Daksha. Hey, I
Hmm.
can't do this yagya unless you offer oblations to Shiva, give up your ego, stop this childish game, mature, grow up. What is all this nonsense? That would have been the spiritual level, right?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
as a spiritual teacher is supposed to, but then sometimes the king is very stubborn and adamant and rebellious. Then what the minister will do, the advisor will do, the advisor will try to save the guy as much as possible. So Brigu is unable to save Daksha on a spiritual level. He's unable to. The spiritual level means disrespecting Shiva is a spiritual level of injustice. And then
Hmm.
on a moral level, he's also insulting Sati, who is his very own daughter. He gave birth to her. He's part of her body, and her body comes from him. And
Hmm.
still, even on a moral level, he's not even able to be nice to his own daughter. And he
Hmm.
lets her kill herself right in front of everybody. So,
Hmm.
on a moral level, also, Brigu is unable to stop Daksha from allowing such an atrocity to happen. But on the legal level, or whatever you call it, on the body level, he's trying to protect the body of Daksha.
Okay. Hmm.
So he's doing what he can.
Hmm.
That's that's a limitation. We all can do only what we can. We may see this is unjust, this should not be done, whatever. We may see those in how do you say, inconsistencies, discrepancies in justice around
Hmm.
us,
Hmm.
but we can only do what we can do. The strength of Brigu was only at that level of saving the life of Daksha. That's all. He couldn't
Hmm.
save the other aspects. But then it's also Krishna's will, because if he lives, then he will learn the lesson. He'll get the goat head and everything. Only Krishna knows all that.
Hmm.
But for now, Brigu could only save the body. He couldn't save his mind. He couldn't save his spiritual sanity. He's lost it. You can see he's lost it on a spiritual level. He's lost it on a moral level. So far, he
Right.
was lost on spiritual level, right? He was
Hmm.
blaming, he was insulting Shiva. That's spiritual level offenses. But then here he lost also his moral ground, because he lost Sati in such a terrible way. He lost even his moral grounding now. And now the
Hmm.
only thing left is his body. That's the only thing. So Bhrigu's like, okay, let me save at least that.
Hmm. Like it also shows like like how minimal we can do, right? We are not the
Yeah,
like controller to do anything. Like we will be able to do everything. We have to depend on Krishna. Like it shows that sometimes it
yeah,
happens even though we want to do so many things. Like only something we can do.
exactly. It's a good lesson, right? And I'm
Yes.
thinking also of Hiranyakashipu. And I'm thinking how, whether it's Daksha, he has the whole world wrapped around his finger, but he cannot get his own son-in-law to get up when he walks in. The
Mm.
ego of such people are hurt so deeply. You have all mystic powers, you have all the demigods on wrapped on your finger, but then your own son-in-law doesn't stand up to greet you, and then that, drives you completely nuts. And then see, similar thing had happened to Hiranyakashipu. Remember, he could control the whole demigods. It is said that described that Hiranyakashipu would have literally the demigods like planets like Chandra and Surya and Kuja and all the demigods, Indra. All these demigods were tied. Literally, he could tie them to his singhasan, to his throne. Like that, he was completely controlling them, and they were under his suppression. All the demigods were under suppression of Hiranyakashipu. But then he couldn't get his own little baby boy, 5-year-old, to not say that Vishnu is supreme. And that was driving him nuts. Completely, he just went frantic and crazy. And so the point is, even if we have the greatest power, the smallest things can hurt us if we have identified ourselves and our goal with our ego. But somebody could be very humble person, even if they lose everything, like the Pandavas, they lost their whole kingdom, but it didn't affect them. And yeah, they were insulted like million times more than anybody like Daksha. I mean, okay, Shiva didn't stand up, means he didn't understand Shiva. He doesn't understand the personality type incompatibilities here. Daksha is very much about prestige and social status and everything on an external level of hygiene and whatnot. But Shiva he's Avaduta. He's completely on a different level of devotion. He's known as Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambho. Without worshipping Shiva, you can't please Supreme Lord. So, which means Daksha's ignorance, right? He hasn't even understood, but then he gets so triggered. We also, I mean, I'm telling you, these things is not only Daksha we can blame. We sometimes say, oh, Indra is behaving like this. He did this, Daksha. But we have the same patterns of discrepancies in our character. Sometimes one small thing, somebody told us some small thing, who is she to say like that? And we become so upset and so disturbed. We forget that Krishna has given us all the beautiful gifts we have in our lives, because we get lost into that one thing that's hurting our ego. Am I right?
Right. Yes.
So that's the fate of the mortals, you can say. Any other realizations about this Sati being? Sati is gone now. That's it. Her body is destroyed.
What's coming to my mind is when we are seeing the whole thing from a third person perspective, when we are reading what's happening, right? The drama is happening. As a third person, when we are seeing, we're able to understand so many things. But then when we are one of the players in the drama, which keeps happening, right? It's very difficult because there's so much of absorption in what we are thinking is the right thing, because we are still under the modes, like how you've mentioned. So just thinking third person perspective, or being really detached and looking at the whole thing, there's so much of sense that we can make out, right? But being one of them, I don't it's very difficult to see what is the truth from Krishna's perspective.
Right. It's so true. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know what Krishna thinks and what's the conclusion of the Lord. We see, we all can understand only depending on our level of knowledge and our level of realization. But one thing we can all feel is that compassion, that how could I feel also compassion for Daksha, that he could get so lost that he lost his dear daughter like this. And he has no remorse so far. He'll have later, but I mean, Shiva kills him. But then, of course, the whole drama happens. Why? And then he's told not to leave the guy like that, but at least to have a goat head, right? Can you imagine? He was not greeted by Lord Shiva, right? Because he didn't stand up for that one thing. How many things Daksha did, and he ended up with a goat's head. If that was not an insult enough for him, that oh, my son-in-law didn't stand up, imagine the humility that will come by having goat head. sometimes we fight for something so small that we lose something very big. He lost his head, He was telling, oh, Shiva has this and that. He was criticizing Shiva. Then at the end, he's the one who's going to have a really funny looking face. You know what I mean? So we have to be so careful. Sometimes I remember there was a contest, something, and then I won in the top 10, and then I won in the top 5. And then there was last 5 of us, we were supposed to speak and go to the stage and do stuff. And then I saw the other girl who was my competition. She was much younger. This is just 5 years ago. And I saw the girl, she was much younger, and she was not confident at all to speak, and she didn't have much experience in life, so she didn't know. And I was very confident, and then I saw that the audience were all how do you say, voting for me. And then I saw the judges also were more toward me. And I remember going there and telling that girl, it's okay, be confident. I remember that mood I had, like I was so confident I was going to win. So I went and I told her like that. And then later, some politics, whatever, one of the judges was like the friend of the father of this girl, and the father had donated a lot of money. So they made this girl only win. And everybody was disappointed, but she did win. And I remember thinking, oh, I went there like one Maharani who thought I'll win. And then Krishna showed me that it doesn't work like that. So I remember feeling that eating the humble pie situation. Mm. So sometimes we think, oh, I know better or something. But when the situation comes on us, like Taruni Radha was saying, and actually it happens to us, we can't blame anybody there. Brigu, if you were in Brigu's place, what would you do? He won't listen to you morally, he won't listen to you spiritually. What would we do? If you were in the mother's place of Sati, we may all think, why nobody stopped her, right? I think like that. I'm thinking, why nobody stopped her? It's not easy to stop her. So only if we are in that situation, we will see the seriousness of the story there.
I'm thinking about Draupadi's situation was even worse than this, right? And Draupadi was actually begging everybody to save her. And no people had time to actually think and save, but then they had more time. Here it was like it happened, and then she just closed her eyes and she went into a trance. Very difficult to bring out somebody who enters into a trance, correct? So it was like almost like it just like kind of happened very fast. But poor Draupadi, she's like, my God, it was such an ordeal. It was going on, and she was like begging. People had time. They could have actually stood up, stopped. They could have done so many things, right? In her case, like how much she's begging. I mean, that scene really, like what do you say? And that was my heart, like how much she begged, how much she was crying, and nobody does anything. And then it's only Krishna, our dear Krishna, who comes to help.
That's a good example to bring in the situation, because it's similar, right? Assembly, everybody watching, nobody is able to do justice on a moral level and spiritual level because they're all bound on the legal level, and they're all just watching. But then the difference was that Draupadi was asking for help. In this case, it was, as you said, like abrupt. That's so true. And another thing is, I mean, at least in this situation, Shiva is not there. Because if Shiva was there, it's a different story. But Shiva is not here. But in the other situation, Pandavas were there. Oh my God. That also like crushes my soul thinking, no? And it was happening in front of the Pandavas. Such powerful people. And same thing. They're bound legally. That was their situation. So that was Krishna's complaint. No, why you got bound legally? Why you didn't skip, or how do you say, why did you not go one level higher? You didn't even have morality to save Draupadi. So he was very upset with the Pandavas for that reason. And they didn't even call him for help. Spiritual, that's the spiritual level.
Like I wonder what was running in their head at that time, right?
Who, Pandavas?
Yeah, like you can't get anything more gross than than what was happening to their own wife. It's not even just another lady; it's their own wife. When we see a woman, something is happening. It's like that's the worst thing. And then here there is attachment factors which comes in my own wife, and this is what's happening. I am sometimes I like when I think about it. It's like wow, what was going in their head? Like why didn't they act? Only Bhima says I want to do something, and then Yudhishthira stops. Like what level
Yeah,
of tolerance, right? What level of tolerance?
I mean, yeah, legal level tolerance, but moral level, they failed, isn't it? Also, spiritual level, they failed. I mean, as I told, no, Bhagavatam is full of stories of devotees who failed. So this gamble match was that kind of a failure for Pandavas. And Krishna, no, when Uddhava asks, when Krishna is answering, one by one, he says all those things. He says, small thing. Krishna says, if only the Pandavas had appointed me to cast the dice against Shakuni, because Duryodhana chose Shakuni, right? He was not casting the dice. He chose Shakuni as his representative. And Krishna tells Uddhava, if only the Yudhishthira had chosen me to cast the dice, he says, he looks at Uddhava and says, imagine what would have been the consequence. you know, imagine what would have been, he says. So they didn't involve Krishna. That was the fault. Krishna again and again and again brings that up. They didn't call me. I was waiting at the door. I was waiting at the door. They didn't call me. That was Krishna's main point. And then they were trying their best to remain on certain level. They wanted to remain loyal to dharma, right? That was their goal, to remain loyal to dharma. But then, what the lower level of dharma, like I said, somebody's being killed and then you're afraid to intervene, because legally you can be bound and you'll be punished or something. That was the fear that Yudhishthir had. And also, it is said that Yudhishthir didn't want to disturb Krishna. He didn't want to bother Krishna. He thought we can sort it out ourselves. That was another reason that he got into that mess. Sometimes we also think, no, why I should involve Krishna? Why I should bother Krishna? I'll sort it out myself. Okay, we can end here today. Thank you very much for your attention. We will continue tomorrow, Daksha being slain. I suggest we read the Srimad Bhagavatam Prabhupada purports of this. There's a lot of nice, interesting things that he speaks about Lord Shiva and other details. Thank you for your participation. Rasastali Mataji and Snehavati, ready for the day. Have a great day. And Tharuni Radha, have a restful sleep. Good night.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I'm sure a fantastic Krishna conscious day. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Jai Tantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri
Jai.